Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Guys at Magic. This is Hunter coming at you with another deck tech. That is right, we are taking a look at another legendary creature from the latest set, Aether Drift. Now, if you guys haven't already seen the other deck techs, well, go check them out. They're in the on the channel, so don't want to miss those as well. But this one, we are sticking with a mono-colored. Before we get to that, I just want to remind everybody that we do with these deck techs. We keep these budgets between $300 and $400 at time of recording. If you guys wanted to see the entire deck list, check the link in the description below. Also, one quick thing before we move on, I just want to big shout out to our Patreon members. They are the reason that we make these deck techs. We do a little poll over there for our Gains Indestructible tier. So everything that you always see on this channel here, for as far as deck techs, they are the ones that vote on what decks we build. So thank you guys so much on Patreon. If you guys wanted to check out what they're seeing, check the link in the description and maybe consider subscribing. Here we go. Let's jump into it. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. But we are talking about Gonti Knight Minister. That is correct. So all about that mono black kind of chaosy theme. So let me just read Gonti real quick. Gonti Knight Minister is 2 and 2 black for a 3/4 legendary creature Aetherborn Rogue. It says whenever a player casts a spell they don't own, that player creates a treasure token. It also says whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller looks at the top card of that opponent's library and exiles it face down. They may play that card for as long as it remains exiled. Mana of any type can be spent to cast a spell this way. Basically what Gonti is doing is saying, hey, this is a world effect for the entire table. If you guys attack each other, you guys can play each other's decks. And if you do cast spells from each other's decks, you also get treasure. So it's just all about chaos here with Gonti, which is a lot of fun because that's what we're trying to do in our deck as well. Our deck is your deck, and yeah, let's go ahead and just jump straight into this. So we'll go ahead and talk about the creatures first. Let's talk about these creatures that can get in with that damage. Like I said, we are trying to get in with damage. We're trying to hit our opponents, so all of these creatures kind of hit that threshold of, hey, it's going to be hard to get these blocked. So Changeling Outcast is 1 black mana for a 1/1 creature shapeshifter. It is a changeling. It says it can't block and can't be blocked. So just swing in for your opponent, just hit it for 1 damage, and take that opponent's card and say, that's pretty good. Dothy Horror, 1 and a black for a 2/1 creature beast. It's got shadow, which, in case you don't remember, this creature can block or be blocked by only creatures with shadow. And Dothy Horror cannot be blocked by white creatures either. Ginger Brute, 1 mana for a 1/1 artifact creature food golem. It's got haste. It can pay 1. Ginger Brute can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with haste. It's got another ability. We can pay 2, tap it, sacrifice Ginger Brute. You gain 3 life. Tormented Soul, 1 mana for a 1/1 creature spirit. It can't be blocked. It is unblockable. Vampire Cutthroat, 1 for 1/1. Skulk, which means this creature can't be blocked by creatures with greater power, and also has lifelink. And Dothy Voidwalker for 2 black mana. It is a 3/2 creature Dothy Rogue. It also has shadow. It says if a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead with a void counter on it. You can tap it, sacrifice Dothy Voidwalker, choose an exiled card an opponent owns with a void counter on it. You may play it this turn without paying its mana cost. Very cool card with Dothy Voidwalker here because not only we can get in with that damage with Dothy, all of our opponents' things are now our things. If our opponents are playing our other opponents' things, they go to the grave. We actually say, that's a pretty good card that you played. I want to play it too. Dothy Voidwalker. Very good. We are all about chaos here, so let's help our opponents more. I know a lot of the times on the channel we say, I don't like to help my opponent. In this case, we are helping our opponents as much as possible. It's going to be fun. So Gix Yawgmoth Praetor, 1 and 2 black for a 3/3 legendary creature Phyrexian Praetor. It says whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card. And then another ability, we could pay 4 and 3 black. Discard X cards, exile the top X card of the target opponent's library. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. So Gix, also a very good card this deck. So like I said, Gix, very chaotic. It's a lot of chaos here. Our opponent's going to be drawing cards off of hitting our opponents, and as well as taking our opponent's cards and playing our opponent's cards, and then we can also play our opponent's cards. It's a lot of opponent words going around, but that's the gist of the deck. So the top of Gonti is actually kind of a treasure kind of producer there. because we also make treasure when we play our opponent's things, which is great. So these next creatures care about treasures. Disciple of the Vault is 1 black mana for a 1/1. It says whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from play, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. That counts your opponents using their treasures that they are making from us as well. So drain them out. Grim Hireling, 3 and a black for a 3/2 creature Tiefling Rogue. This is whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you create 2 treasure tokens. You can also pay 1 black, sacrifice X treasures, and target creature gets -X/-X till end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. Marionette Master for 4 and 2 black. It is a 1/3 creature human artificer. Fabricate 3, in case you forgot what that means, is when this enters the battlefield, put 3 +1/+1 counters on it, or create 3 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature tokens. Trust me when I say you're going to want to put those counters on this, because it says whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. So this coming in with 3 +1/+1 counters comes in as a 4/6. So every time we crack one of our treasures, we are draining someone for 4 life. It's a very mean card. Academy Manufacturer is great here as well. It's 3 mana for a 1/3 artifact creature assembly worker. It says if you could create a clue, food, or treasure token, instead create 1 of each. So every time we make a treasure, we also make a clue and a food. Mirkwood Bats, 3 and a black for a 2/3 creature bat. It's got flying and says whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. So Mirkwood Bats is really good here because we make treasure, we sack treasure. Every time we make one, every time we sack one, we are draining the entire table, except us, 1 life. Next up are some creatures that are pretty good at the thing we are doing, are also just really good black creatures that just fit their utility. That's what I'm talking about. Cryptghast, 3 and a black for a 2/2 creature spirit. It's got Extort. It also says whenever you tap a swamp for mana, you can add an additional black to your mana pool. That's a lot of mana. Great Merchant of Asphodel is 3 and 2 black for a 2/4 creature zombie. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black. You gain life equal to life lost this way. Thieving Varmint is very good in this deck. It's 1 and a black for a 2/1 creature varmint. It's got Death Touch, it's got Lifelink, and also another ability where you can tap it, pay 1 life, and add 2 mana of any 1 color. Spend this mana only to cast spells you don't own. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to play our opponent's things. So just getting extra 2 mana there from Thieving Varmint is very good. It also has Death Touch, which if we didn't have any other creature on the board, we could probably swing in with this. A lot of the times people won't want to block, which also triggers Gonti. Phyrexian Obliterator is kind of a card that goes in here to say, hey, don't touch us, just keep attacking each other. Is 4 black mana for a 5/5 creature Phyrexian Horror. It's got Trample. It says whenever a source deals damage to Phyrexian Obliterator, that source's controller sacrifices that many permanents. That includes lands. So if someone is trying to swing at you, you just keep Phyrexian Obliterator on the field as a blocker and then just block into it. Someone swings at us with something that's huge, you say, okay, now you take all of that damage that you just dealt to Phyrexian Obliterator, you sacrifice that much stuff. So do you really want to swing at me, or do you want to sacrifice things? Ophiomancer is also really good for 2 and a black. It's a 2/2 creature human shaman. At the beginning of each upkeep, if you control no snakes, you create a 1/1 black snake creature token with Death Touch. This is just kind of a little enabler just to create that 1/1 snake with Death Touch, just to try and get in with that extra damage, because like I said, with Thieving Varmint, people don't like to block Death Touchers. They don't want their things to go away. So that's just a quick, easy way to get in and get that Gonti trigger. The final creatures in this deck is what we're doing. We're thieving. We're all about thieving things. So your stuff is our stuff, and that's what these creatures care about. Opposition Agent, 2 and a black for a 3/2 creature human rogue. It's got Flash. It says you control your opponents while they're searching their libraries. And whenever an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though there were any mana of any color to cast them. So any kind of tutor effect that people are playing with Opposition Agent on the field, we are now tutoring. We take the card that they wanted to tutor for. And yeah, same thing goes with kind of any fetch lands. We just go and take those lands. Those are now ours. Tiny Bones to Pickpocket, 1 black mana for a 1/1 legendary creature skeleton rogue. It's got Death Touch and says whenever Tiny Bones to Pickpocket deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target non-land permanent card from that player's graveyard, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. So if we're not getting it off the top of their library, we'll just take it from their graveyard. Nashi Moon Sage's Scion is 1 and 2 black for a 3/2 legendary creature, Rat Ninja. It does have Ninjutsu for 3 and a black, which means you can go ahead and just fling this into the field if someone did not decide to block one of our 1/1 death touches or something like that. And then when it deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. Yeah, just extra kind of, hey, let me play your stuff. And of course, it's not a Gonti deck without the other Gonti, right? So Gonti, Lord of Luxury, 2/2 black for a 2/3 legendary creature, Aetherborn Rogue. It's got Death Touch. Says when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library. Exile one of them face down, then put the rest on the bottom of that library in a random order. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. So just kind of a one-time effect, but it is still pretty good in this deck. Lobelia, Defender of Bag End, is 2 and a black for a 2/2 legendary creature, Halfling Citizen. It says when it enters the battlefield, look at the top card of each opponent's library and exile those cards face down. Then you can tap it, sacrifice an artifact, choose one. Until end of turn, you may play a card exiled with Lobelia without paying its mana cost, or each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So this card also just kind of just steals their stuff, as well as, hey, sacrifice one of your treasures. Each opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life. Hey, if we have one of those other effects on the field, the life drain is going to be pretty immense. Arvinox, the Mind Flail, 4 and 3 black for a 9/9 legendary enchantment creature horror. It says Arvinox, the Mind Flail, isn't a creature unless you control 3 or more permanents you don't own. And then at the beginning of your end step, exile the bottom card of each opponent's library face down for as long as those cards remain exiled. You may look at them, you may cast permanent spells from among them, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. This is an alternate art version of the original, the Mind Slayer. I believe that's what it was, the original from Stranger Things. So it's got that Stranger Things flavor of playing things from the bottom of the library, in case you were like, that's a really weird effect. It is, trust me. But we're still stealing it, and we're here to do that. Elder Brain for 5 and 2 black for a 6/6 creature horror. It's got menace. It says when it attacks a player, exile all cards from that player's hand. Then they draw that many cards. You may play lands and cast spells from among the exiled cards for as long as they remain exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were any mana of any color to cast it. It's a very mean effect. If you get Elder Brain down on the field and your opponent has a lot of cards in their hand, we now have control of all of those cards. So, fun. Brain Stealer Dragon, 5 and 2 black for a 6/6 creature dragon horror. It's got flying. At the beginning of end step, exile the top card of each opponent's library. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana so it were any mana of any color to cast it. Whenever a non-land permanent an opponent owns enters the battlefield under your control, they lose life equal to its mana value. So we are just surrounding ourselves with just different ways to play our opponent's things. Brain Stealer Dragon, if it stays around on the field, it's going to get pretty painful for our opponents. And I'm also going to throw in Emrakul, the Promised End. It is 13 mana for a 13/13 legendary creature Eldrazi. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each card types among cards in your graveyard. It also says when you cast this spell, you gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, that player takes an extra turn. It's got flying, it's got trample, it's got protection from instants. Let me tell you, when I was building this deck, I was like, I need something that's just really over the top because we're trying to play all of our opponent's things. And I thought, that's exactly what we're doing. We're playing our opponent's things. So why not just put the big, the bad, the card that just absolutely just plays your opponent's turn? So Emrakul, that's why it's in here. Moving on to the sorcery section of our deck, we are playing with some removal. We are mono black, so why not, right? So Blasphemous Edict, 3 and 2 black sorcery. You may pay just 1 black mana rather than pay the spell's mana cost. If there are 13 or more creatures on the battlefield, each player sacrifices 13 creatures of their choice. Very, very easy in a game of EDH where if things are getting out of hand, it's always going to be just that 1 black mana, and this gets around any kind of indestructible because they have to sacrifice, so it's not destroy. Speaking of destroy though, Damnation, 2 and 2 black sorcery. Destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. Feed the Swarm for 1 and a black sorcery. Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. And Torment of Hailfire, X and 2 black for sorcery. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. I've seen many of games where Torment of Hailfire, if you can actually draw this in the very late portion of the game, this might just end the game for you and you just win. Because depending on how much you throw into that X cost, it gets out of hand very quickly. The other sorceries that we're throwing in is still your stuff, my stuff. Cruel Claw's Heist for 2 black mana. It's a sorcery. You can gift them a card. If you don't remember that, you just say, you can draw a card. Target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. Exile that card. If the gift was promised, you may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. Breach the Multiverse. 5 and 2 black for sorcery. Each player mills 10 cards. For each player, choose a creature or planeswalker card in that player's graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. Then each creature you control becomes a Phyrexian in addition to his other types. This card basically says, hey, we're going to mill everybody 10, and then we're just going to reanimate one thing from everybody's graveyard. It's so mean because it doesn't say that it has to be from the milled cards. So if you saw something in your opponent's graveyard that you really liked, grab that. It doesn't have to be the milled. Predator's Hour for 1 and a black sorcery. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain menace, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library face down. You may look at it and play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were any mana of any color to cast that spell. So all 3 of these cards are really good on just your stuff, my stuff. Our final 2 sorceries we are throwing in the deck. We are mono black, so kind of card draw is kind of hard to come by, but we are playing a lot of our opponent's things, so is it really necessary? Either way, we are throwing in card draw. Night's Whisper, 1 and a black sorcery. You draw 2 cards, you lose 2 life, and Sign in Blood, same basically thing. 2 black mana sorcery, target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. Sure, if you really want to be chaotic, you could be like, don't swing at me this game, I will give you card draw. Boom. There you go. But most of the time, just target yourself. Moving on to the instants, we got more removal. Consuming Corruption, 2 black mana instant. It deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker, and you gain X life, where X is the number of swamps you control. We are a mono black deck. As you will see in the land department, we have a lot of swamps. This can deal a lot of damage and gain you a lot of life. Defile, 1 black. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each swamp you control. I just said we have a lot of swamps. Go for the Throat, 1 and a black for an instant. Destroy target non-artifact creature. Infernal Grasp, 1 and a black. Instant, destroy target creature. You lose 2 life. And Sheoldred's Edict, a little bit of a module spell, is 1 and a black. Instant, you choose 1. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature, or each opponent sacrifices a creature token, or each opponent sacrifices a planeswalker. You choose what you need in the moment. Our final 2 instants are just good cards for the deck. Dark Ritual. I think you have to run this if you're running just mono black. It is just 1 black mana. Instant, you add 3 black mana. Yeah. Outrageous Robbery. 1 more card to say, hey, give me your stuff. X, 2 black, instant. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. And if you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were any mana of any color to cast it. Yeah, so Outrageous Robbery. Throw a lot into that X cost just to steal a bunch of your opponent's cards. Time to move on to the artifact department of our deck. We will kick it off with the mana rocks, of course. Arcane Signet, Falwar Stone, Mind Stone. I think you guys all know what these cards are. They all cost 2 mana. Arcane Signet taps for a mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Falwar taps for a mana that an opponent's lands can produce. Mind Stone taps for a colorless mana, but you can also pay 1, tap it, and sacrifice Mind Stone to draw a card. Soul Ring, 1 mana, tap it to add 2 colorless. Jet Medallion, and is not necessarily a mana rock, but it is a mana cost reducer. It's 2 mana. Black spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And Thought Vessel, 2 mana. You have no maximum hand size. Tap to add a colorless. Now I am going to be throwing in quite the amount of equipment into this deck because I feel like it's very needed in this deck, and I'll tell you why for each one. Blade of Selves, 2 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has Myriad and an equip cost of 4. If we attach this to one of our unblockable little creatures, we are going to be dealing damage to every single opponent because Myriad says whenever you attack, you make a copy of that creature tapped and attacking your other opponents. So yeah, that just triggers Gonti 3 times, which is really good. Commander's Plate, 1 mana, artifact, equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+3. It has protection from each color that's not in your commander's color identity. Equipped commander for 3, equipped cost of 5. Just a bit of protection for our commander because we are a monocolored, which means all the other 4 colors cannot touch us. Lightning Greaves also going in for 2 mana. Artifact equipment. Equipped creature has haste and shroud. Equipped cost is 0. Of course, Swiftfoot Boots also going in. 2 mana. Artifact equipment. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste. Equipped cost of 1. So once again, just more protection for our kind of commander. We want to keep it on the board as long as possible because chaos is going to ensue. Moving on to the other artifacts that don't care that they're not equipment. Staff of Eden, Vault's Key. 6 mana for a legendary artifact that says when it enters the battlefield, you put a legendary permanent card not named Staff of Eden, Vault's Key from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You can also just tap this, draw a card for each permanent you control but don't own. So hopefully we have a lot of those. We're going to be drawing a lot of cards with the Staff of Eden. Helm of Awakening is another artifact that we're throwing in to cause a little bit more chaos. It is 2 mana artifact. Spells cost 1 less to cast. You heard that right. That is a world effect. So all of your opponents, their spells cost 1 less to cast. We're doing this for fun, so let's do it even bigger. Whip of Erebos, 2 and 2 black, legendary enchantment artifact. Creatures you control have lifelink. Another ability, you can pay 2 and 2 black, tap it, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. If it would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Activate only as a sorcery. So Whip of Erebos, maybe not using that second ability too often, but just giving our creatures lifelink. We're trying to just not die, right? So just keep hitting our opponents, keep gaining some life. Let's move on to the enchantments of our deck. We will start with some of the utility ones. Black Market Connections, 2 and a black enchantment. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you choose 1 or more. You create a treasure token, you lose 1 life. You draw a card, you lose 2 life. Or you can create a 3/2 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling, you lose 3 life. You can do all 3. Go full blown, lose 6 life, draw a card, get a treasure, make a 3/2. Who cares? We also really care about treasures in this deck too. So Revel in Riches, 4 and a black. It says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you make a treasure token. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you just win the game. Alternate win con, just throw it on here. Bitter Blossom, 1 and a black. Tribal Enchantment Fairy. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and you put a 1/1 black fairy rogue creature token with flying onto the battlefield. It just makes a little 1/1 flyer every single upkeep of yours. Just gets in with that damage. Just keep pecking at your opponents, trying to just a little bit of evasion, just trying to trigger Gonti as much as possible. Blood Chief Ascension, 1 black mana, says at the beginning of each end step, and remember that, each, not just ours, if an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Blood Chief Ascension. And then it says whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if Blood Chief Ascension has 3 or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life. If you do, you gain 2 life. So whenever our opponents are playing our other opponent's cards, those cards then go to the grave. They lose. That opponent loses 2 life. It's this card right here is going to get pretty chaotic. Phyrexian Arena, 1 and 2 black enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card, you lose 1 life. Luckily, we got Whip of Erebos trying to gain us that life back, but it's going to be nuts. The next enchantments here, we're trying to stay alive and just sit back and watch the chaos happen. So these 3 kind of just emphasize, don't touch me. Ghoulish Impetus, 2 and a black. Enchantment Aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, has death touch, and is goaded. And whenever creature dies, return Ghoulish Impetus back to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So Ghoulish Impetus is very hard to get rid of. We just keep enchanting all of our opponent's things, saying, hey, it's goaded. You have to swing at someone else. That's not me. And then if that creature dies, Ghoulish Impetus just goes back onto another creature. Just keep doing that over and over. No Mercy for 2 and 2 black enchantment. Whenever a creature deals damage to you, destroy it. Do your opponents really want to swing at you? Because if they do, I think I'm just going to say no blocks, and then their creature's just dead. Cunning Rhetoric, 2 and a black enchantment. It says whenever an opponent attacks you and or one of your planeswalkers you control, exile the top card of that player's library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. Same situation we've been doing over and over and over. If our opponents decide to attack us, we're going to take their cards and play them for ourselves. And one more time, your stuff is mine. Court of Locthwain, 2 and 2 black enchantment. When it enters battlefield, you become the monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of target opponent's library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. If you're the monarch until end of turn, you may cast a spell from among cards exiled with Court of Locthwain without paying its mana cost. Very powerful if we're the monarch. Cannot wait. It is going to be pretty crazy. And finally, let's go ahead and move on to the land department of our deck. We'll start with the utility. Bojuka Bog enters tapped. When it enters, exile target player's graveyard, tap it for a black. Rogue's Passage, tap it for a colorless, pay 4, tap it, target creature can't be blocked this turn. Once again, ensure you're getting it with damage. War Room, tap it for a colorless, or pay 3, tap it, pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity. That's just 1 to draw a card. You've got Shizo, Death's Storehouse. It's a legendary land. You can tap to add a black to your mana pool, or you can just pay black, tap it. Target legendary creature gains fear until end of turn, which is very hard to block. It's like only artifacts or black creatures can block them. Cabal Coffers is a land that you can pay 2 into, tap it to add a black for each swamp you control. And Cabal Stronghold similarly, but can right away tap for a colorless and pay 3, tap it to add a black for each basic swamp you control. And of course, we got to talk about the basics. So we are adding in 29 basic swamps. And that is going to do it. That is Gonti Knight Minister. That is quite the deck. Thievery for all, as I like to say. So hopefully you guys liked that video. I mean, if you did, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you're wondering, at the time of recording, I said we like to keep these budgets between $300 to $400. You're sitting around $335 at time of recording. Could have changed. Check the link in the Mox field if you want to see the entire deck list. Down at the bottom of the Mox field, it actually shows the price of the decks. Yeah, so it could be different at the time that you're watching this video. As far as the final thoughts of Gonti, let me just say this deck, a lot of fun. I played it a lot, and it's pretty fun just to play your opponent's things and then also watch your other opponents play your other opponent's things, and then just watch the board explode, essentially. You just watch, you sit back, you watch the kind of chaos ensue, and you just laugh the entire time because that's what this deck's all about. So, yeah. Give it a try. Play test it on that Moxfield link as well. Also in the description, you'll find links to all of our social media accounts. Don't want to miss out on that stuff, so follow us on those if you haven't done so already. And on the screen right now, those are all of our Patreon subscribers. Thank you guys so much for your added support. It really does mean the world to us. If you guys wanted to check out what they're seeing, which is some exclusive content over on our Patreon, check the link in the description as well and consider subscribing. And a very special shout out to our Gains Indestructible tier, starting with Daryl Tripp, Demarion Turner, Dr. Rome, Jimmy Ward, Kevo, Larry Killian, Robert Myatt, Thrifty PSGR, Tim K, and Ryder Cole. You guys are awesome. Appreciate every single one of you. And until the next video, hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.